Welcome to O-Talkin' with Dave. Put your hands together for the pastor of positivity whose glass is always at least half full. Here's Dave.
Hey, how we doing out there? I hope you're doing great. I am top shelf and ready to go. Ready to go today. I've been feeling a little nostalgic lately. I do that a lot. I'm probably more nostalgic than your average bear. But I was back at my dad's house last couple of weeks. And my sister and my niece and I were going through pictures. Oh my goodness. When I was little, I was so cute. When I got married, though, I noticed I needed better friends. My fashion and hairstyle was, it left a lot of room for improvement. But however, anytime I go back, I've moved all over the country, and at some point during the trip, I usually go by where I grew up. And where I grew up is not where my parents have lived for the last 40 years. It's the circle. I grew up in a circle. And by a circle, I mean a real circle. It's not just a cul-de-sac. I grew up just sitting on the front porch looking around, 1215 York Circle, Sheffield, Alabama. So I'm gonna reminisce. I promise it won't be just, hey Dave, this is your life. There's gonna be something in here, hopefully, that you can pull from it. And you know how much I love my family, both my wife and my kids, but also, my sisters, my parents, all of that. That's not really what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the circle. So many lessons, memories, things that I can recall and apply to that circle. It still speaks to me. I don't even have to be there, but when I go by, I always go around there and man, so many things come back, and I love it. I love it. Introducing the setting a little bit is, it's. I grew up born in 65, so late 60s, early 70s. The little town I'm from, Sheffield, Alabama, right next to Muscle Shoals, which more people know. Muscle Shoals, Florence, Tuscumbia, birthplace of Helen Keller. There you go. But this community. In the 50s and 60s, TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, they brought in a ton of people to help build up the dams and that whole series of waterways there. So they had a ton of engineers, and they would bring them in, and they built a lot of, cookie cutter houses that over time people built onto, did different things. But there would be, because of that, there were a lot of people that stayed and some moved on. So the little circle I grew up, it was just such a great place. Kids everywhere in that area. The little community had 4 or 5 circles like mine. Of course, mine was the best. But the circle part, it was like a play field in the middle. It seemed to me like a football field growing up. I go back now, and it's probably in yards, probably 20, 30 yards long at the most. But man, it was huge when I was growing up. And that was the center of everything. I mean, you grow up around there, and it's every range of humanity you can think of. At any point, it wasn't quiet. It's not a quiet country town, but at any point you could hear children laughing or crying or getting yelled at. All sorts of things. Yard work going on, people talking in their backyards. Hey, everybody, every person in the neighborhood, all the adults had permission to whip me. I could get a good whipping if I deserved it. That was well known. And in that situation, everybody watches everybody's kids. It was great. You get on your bicycle and go. Fantastic. But I'm going to talk about the circle. Back then, it was like a sitcom, a fishbowl. It was like a documentary of growing up in the South to me. And as I look back, it holds true. Wisdom back then, it takes me through challenges today. recall an application. But back then, the wisdom wasn't downloaded. It was overheard. Absolutely. Life keeps giving you tests over and over and over. Well, in my case, that circle gave me the answers early on. Even if I wasn't paying attention at the time, I'm paying attention now. You think about it, the front porch in the South is a special thing. It absolutely is. Great things happen on your front porch. My front porch, so much time on it. Had 5 steps, I remember to this day. And, we had made little games around it, but we had 5 members of my family, so 5 steps. And it was really not a porch. It was a stoop. 5 steps, a little landing area, enough for 2 or 3 people to stand on if they needed to. The mailbox was on the front porch. It wasn't at the road. So and the road was just 20 feet away. But that front porch, it was fantastic. Sitting on that porch waiting for something to happen, or just getting up, going out and observing, because in the circle, my house was not in the very back, but right next to the back, but my side was just a little higher in elevation, and so we had a great view. It was fantastic. I mean, the front porches, from my front porch, you could see all the others all the way around, and I'll go around the circle in a minute, but you could see, men and women on their porches or in their front yards, they're smoking or, sipping, scowling. Yeah. A lot of yelling. The acoustics were great in the circle. Storytelling. That's the best, my best memories. Just hanging on every word of some of the people there. But all these lessons, nobody knew that they were lessons. Nobody knew that they would come in handy later on. We're just living our life. The ones who were, we had some people that they were just mean until their grandkids showed up. And okay, all right, now I see that other side. So you learn to gauge people's humanity a little bit. People carrying a lot of pain. And then every once in a while, that soft spot will show up. And you learn how to wait for it or look for it. And this is as a little kid, you learn these just by being around people. The quiet ones, just like Papa, the quiet ones, you hang around them, and when they talk, okay, what they say usually mattered. I think of Mr. Swan talked a lot with me, but around others he was quiet. Mr. Pirtle was quiet, but when he said something, he would laugh, and it was like, okay. And these people were a lot older than me. So sitting on, front porch, waiting on my dad to get home, that was great. Mom always created an air of anticipation. But the acoustics, I'll talk about the acoustics of the circle. Well, it's partially the acoustics of the circle and maybe Dad's muffler that needed some attention. However, you could hear him coming for blocks away in that anticipation. And it's while we were on the porch, we would notice things. It was fantastic, man. And from everybody's porches or front yards, they could see whatever activity was going on. And it was an endless reel. It's fantastic. The world still has porches. I've got porches now. It's kind of, I think the trend to have a deck. People sit on their decks now. Well, you can't see everything from your deck. But I think it's important to take time and symbolically spend more time on your porch and look at your surroundings. Look at your circle. Back then, everybody mattered. Everybody knew everybody's name. Everybody had a role, whether it was established or accepted or all of that. And it was fantastic. We didn't have a community. We had a neighborhood, and the neighborhood was even more than that, because you had your section, your circle, and just going around. I mean, on the far end, there's Miss Crittenden. She was always so old. So much older than me. That's not a negative at all. That's actually a compliment. However, I never knew Mr. Crittenden, but she had all these kids. One of them was, she had so many, but Hootie Crittenden was one of them. He was a football coach. He was a motivator. He was fantastic. Him and Griffin, who is his brother, they coached rivalry youth football teams. Oh, and that was a big thing. Oh, it was so big. And then people would constantly come over, and you knew all of them by name. They knew all the neighborhood kids because they spent time at their mother and grandmother's house. So you got to know those. And it was, it was just part of it. They almost got to be part of the circle by association. Then next to her was Miss Tally. Now, Miss Tally, not a lot of people got along with Miss Tally. She was pretty critical. She was pretty mean. She's the one that if your ball went into her yard, she has been known to get it and go inside. And she would just yell. She was constantly, you knew that. I don't know if it was bluff or what it was, but she had a bark and a bite. And my parents, though, they had a friendly relationship with her. They felt sorry for her. Her husband was in World War II. And I don't know how far after that he passed away. I never saw him. But she had a tender side, too. I mean, she didn't have a lot of money. So, I mean, she gave us Christmas presents. She didn't give any of the other kids Christmas presents. I mean, it may be a bottle of ketchup or she made rice pudding. Oh, it was delicious. So she would bring it sometimes. And my parents would sit in there with her and talk. They sat in the front yard a lot because she would smoke. My parents didn't smoke, but she would smoke. And so they'd sit out and just go on and on and on. And I can remember she would run everybody down the road, and my parents would, halfway take up for them or whatever, but they spent time with her. And then she ended up giving me all of her husband's World War II memorabilia, the duffel bag, the mess kit, all of this stuff. My son and I were in Baltimore recently and went to a World War II, a military museum. I forget what it is, Veterans Museum. But I saw a lot of the memorabilia. I said, I've got that stuff. Mr. Tally's. But that I had to be special to her in order for her to give this. And if you'll remember the story that I told Mom on her deathbed, or the confession, that involved Miss Tally as well. So then you move on around, and there's the Swans, Mr. and Miss Swan. Now, they were still a couple. I mean, they were both still alive. Mr. Swan was known for two things in the neighborhood. He fished. You would see him come in, and his garage, he would open it up and go to the back, and there's all this fishing stuff. And tell me, fishing, I could listen to him for hours. But also, his lawn was unbelievable. He had zoysia grass when no one had that, and it looked like a carpet. And he didn't let a lot of people walk on it. He let me and my sisters walk on it. But I would go down there. I would see him down there on his front porch and go down there, and he would tell a lot of the same stories over and over. But I loved them, and constantly these stories come up. Something will happen. I'm thinking, well, that's like what Mr. Swan said, and you're prepared for it because you can use that analogy. But I loved the Swans, and everybody. When you get out of your car, no matter if you're a kid getting out of your parents' car, or when you can drive, you get out of your car, you look around and you wave. That's what you do. You go to your car, you look around, if anybody's out, you wave. Now, that's not a big deal, right? No, it's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement, and we always did it. I still do it to this day. If I go around there, I don't know the people anymore. Nobody lives there that lived there these many years ago. But if I see them, I'll wave that's the circle, man. So next to the Swans was Mr. Purtle. Mr. and Miss Purtle. They were always, all these people were old when I was young. So I was, thus my comfort and appreciation for older people. I've always had it. Mr. Purtle had a huge yard. I remember when I started cutting grass in my early teens, 12 years old. Big yard. Oh, it took me forever. But it was great because it was very back, the cornerstone of the circle. Mr. Purtle never had a car, ever. He and Miss Purtle, if they needed to go somewhere, they had a cab driver come get them. They had a regular guy they called. Never had one. Fantastic. Remember, he's the one that he would walk places. He'd walk to church. You could set your clock by Mr. Purtle. Fantastic. Huge Kentucky fan. I used to got down to his house to listen to Kentucky games on the radio. And we'd sit in there. Now, he smoked too, but he didn't smoke outside. He smoked cigars, Tampa Nuggets, I believe. And then he went on to some other brand, but you could tell. And Miss Purtle was kind of like Aunt B. She was always doing something around the house and making something. And you couldn't go by without her wanting to feed you in some way. So great. Just like grandparents. But it's so good. And then next to them was Miss Shirley, her husband had passed away, and she was a school teacher. She had kids my sister's age, right next door to us, to the right. Then later, she moved on, and the Dyers moved in. A young couple at the time, a school librarian, and he was an Alabama football player, ex-Alabama football player, played tight end. I later played on a lot of industrial league games with him. So now we're getting a little bit younger. And of course, my house, my parents, Dad worked at Reynolds. Mom was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. And we just, we kept track of everybody. To the left, I only got 2 more. To the left were, a lot of people went through the house. I mean, you had goodness gracious, you had the Byers, the Huckabas, the Waldrops, you had a bunch of them. So you had some with kids, some without, but it was right next door. So you had stuff out front, then you had our backyards connected. It was great. And then the backyard connected to John and Peanut and all these other guys. It's not his real name, but And then on the very end was Miss Campbell for the longest. And we never really got along with Miss Campbell. She was down there. She was a boisterous lady, sweet lady. I found out later. Very boisterous, loud. Some might call her abrasive. If we had had an HOA, she would have been the director, I believe. However, her grandkids would come over from time to time, and we'd go by and we would say hi to them, and we didn't go in the yard because Miss Campbell was, but when her grandkids were there, she was so nice, so sweet. And it's like, well, this lady's not mean. She's a grandmother. Miss Campbell is all right. She's like my grandmother. And so you learn that. But also, I said earlier, the mailbox is up on the porch. The postman comes up to your door and puts your mail in there. You know his name. The garbage men, they came on Mondays. You know who they are. You wave. It's all the meter reader. You know what a meter reader is? They come in, they go into your backyard, look at the meter on the side of the house and take it down, and that's how they get you your bill. But we knew them. We knew them as that. Even if we didn't know them in the community, we knew them. We would see them out somewhere and we'd say, hey, call them. Great. And then on Thursdays, the produce guy came by. Guy in a truck, and he would stop at Miss Crittenden's house because she was the oldest, out of respect. And everybody would just come to him and get fresh fruit or fresh produce. It was great. I mean, I had some money from time to time, and I'd go down, had a nickel, I could get an apple. And that guy is the one that taught me, and along with the other ladies in there, they taught me the difference in a red delicious and a yellow delicious and a Rome apple, all these different things. This is for eating. This is for cooking. These are sour. These are blah, blah, blah. It's just part of it. But that was normal. On Thursdays, that's what you do. And Saturdays, you get up and I watch cartoons and you eat your cereal, but you're always looking out the front window or sitting on the front porch to see. You already know what's going on, but still, you show up and you see it. And it's fantastic. You can see everything from our porch. If you don't value people until they do something outstanding, then you're missing out on who they are every day. And things that some people never noticed because they were too busy. As I was young, we had, I think, 3 channels. We didn't watch TV. We didn't have any video games. If I wasn't playing with John and Tommy and Scott and Tony and all these people, I was probably on the front porch or in the front yard or in the circle doing something. And that's how I learned to observe my surroundings. The thing is, we look people in the eye. We talk to people. We used our manners. And if we didn't, someone else would call us on it too. It was table stakes in the circle. And I absolutely love it. We would go to the park. Wasn't in the circle, but close by was the park. And they had a lot of rides and stuff. But that's where I would go and, play basketball. You go bouncing the ball. Had to tell my mom. She had to make sure where we were. Plus, she could call people along the way or at the park and say, is David still up there? Boom. Dial phone. Yeah, on the wall, landline. But anyway, at the park, I learned different things too. The circle is pretty much us and people we knew. However, I found that when I went to the park, basketball goals, big baseball field, place you could play there, all of these things. And now I'm with other kids and other adults outside the circle. But what I found was the things I had learned in the circle, how to deal with people, how to treat people, look them in the eye, speak to them. If you're curious, ask a question. That was so helpful at the park. When kids are negotiating different teams, you're picking teams, or if somebody's, there's some sort of argument during the game and settling disputes and all of that. I've learned all that back, with all these people I just named in the circle. Now we're in a bigger crowd. Also dealing with adults there. The adults would play on the weekends basketball, all right? And eventually I got to the point where I could play with them. I was younger, but I didn't back away from them. So when they needed somebody, they'd call me down there and I could start playing. I can't tell you how much that helped me to be included with groups, older groups, who were more skilled, bigger, more experienced. It helped so much. And then, different aged kids. You're around there. You learn, you may get picked on. You may not. Some of the big kids may take up for you. You find your role. You find your voice. But it all started in the circle. Yeah, and there's a lot of times, things are unfair. Yeah, you may get pushed around a little bit or knocked in the dirt or whatever. But hey, it made me tough. Gave me some grit. My buddy John would always take up for me, for sure. And man, he had grit, there's no doubt. But a lot of that came from the same circle. Produced different products as far as the kids that came out of that. And the thing is, childhood, it's not always kind. It wasn't Shangri-La. I'm thinking back. But it was an education every step of the way. Every step of the way. So looking back, the older you get, the more your past comes up and explains why you think this way or why you don't do things, why you don't hesitate on sometimes and you do in others. And then, I thought, sometimes anger was one thing when it's really grief. And a lot of, a woman I thought was nosy. No, she was lonely. Miss Tally, she was the way she was because of grief, not anger. And you learn that over time and you see that. And then in times things have happened to me and I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is the way Mr. Pirtle acted when this happened. And he was this. So it helped me identify things in my life. Your past is full of clues. You can revisit it without rewriting it. But to forget about your past, and I know some people have some very painful pasts. Don't forget it. I'm not saying, regret and all that. I got a lot of talks on that. Your past is giving you clues as to your present and your future. And I think we can turn a lot of those memories into our own mentorship. I'm not big on life coaches or mentors or, things like that. To me, the big thing I try to teach people is learn how to do it yourself. Learn how to self-diagnose and self-prescribe and self-analyze and fix yourself. Not that you don't need help every now and then. Now, that's the whole thing behind, recall and application. I think we got everything we need. Now, I've got an O-Talk coming up about that. I've thought long and hard. I've done tons of research around, is that a skill that can be learned? It's obviously a skill, but can it be learned? Can it be taught? And I got one coming up on it. I don't feel like I can do it justice yet. That's why I haven't done it, but I'm close. Being able to pull all these things from your past and apply it. Even the weeds. Even that resentment and regret and all that stuff. Okay, it's coming. A little commercial. Da, 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 da. You know what? Let's take a commercial break for Diet Mountain Dew. They're not a sponsor, but they could be. Yeah, I've been told that's unprofessional, and so that's why I keep doing it, so that one person, bite me. So when we talk about turning memories into your mentorship or your guide or your coach, I love that. So the thing is, you are the porch. I am my front porch from back then. I go by now and I look up and I think, man, how did me and Mom sit on that thing? However, I meet people now who may have come by the circle and they know my mom and my dad, or they know me, or they know whatever. I am that front porch to them. I am that circle. I'm the ambassador. They would talk about things. Oh, I remember we used to cut through there on the way to school. I'm like, I remember that. Because you either came through right before us or right after us, and we would see you as we walked to Blake School. Well, me, my older sisters, and the whole group. By the time we got there, we had a whole group going to school. But you are that now. No matter how much you deny it, every part of your past is part of who you are. It's not digital. It may not be. It may not be AI or professional. But it's still the circle, as far as I'm concerned. It's still me. What you say matters. What you model matters even more. Anytime you are around me or look, you're going to hear stories. You're going to hear probably a lot of the same stories. But a lot of that, it comes from the circle. Because the circle is in almost every decision I've made. Somewhere you can weave in there and find out. It's how I treat people now. You don't need a stage. I love stages, but you don't need one of those to teach. You just need somebody watching. You don't need a seat in a crowd to learn. You just need to watch. But I learned all of that from the circle. And I think that's where I come from. Somebody's always watching you. I remember I would do whatever. I couldn't get away with anything. I remember one time we knocked a light out in the circle. Well, no need to make up a story. Somebody saw it. Somebody's always watching. They know before we even go in and tell the story or deny it or whatever, because somebody's always watching. That has followed me through my whole life. So, I love the circle. York Circle, Sheffield, Alabama. However, everyone has a circle. You've got a circle. You don't have to grow up in a... it's crazy because a lot of the different areas that I've taken my family, it's either been a circle or a cul-de-sac. I think there's only one that wasn't. And it was a street that was close to a circle. But you grow up, no matter where it is, you have a circle, even though it's maybe not be a physical circle. You've got one right now, whether you realize it or not. You do. Your circle is the group of people who watch how you live. Not just what you say. It's family, of course. It's friends, co-workers, neighbors, people who follow you on social media. That's a more extended circle. But people who overhear you in a checkout line or at the bank. People hear you going down a sidewalk or getting coffee, all of that. That's part of your circle. I cover that in one of my talks about your circle of influence. But people overhear you, and you have no clue who you are influencing. And you don't know who's going to influence you next. So every one of us lives in a circle. The only question is, are you using it or are you wasting it? You know, a circle is not about fame. It's about proximity. Yeah, I remember Mac McAnally has a line in a song, "In the City." Jimmy Buffett recorded it and did it in concert. But it talked about how crazy the city is. And it says, in the city, they say the proximity warps their mind till they're shooting one another just to pass the time. Proximity, that's your circle. You don't have to be a leader. No titles in the circle. There's no mics. You don't have 1 million followers, but everybody has a role. A certain person comes up, you don't have to describe that. Everybody has a role. And sometimes they change or evolve or whatever. You just got to be consistent. Be close enough to them for people to see how you handle life. How do you handle it? Are you dramatic? Are you trauma-riddled all the time? Is everything a big deal? How do you handle crisis? How do you handle a fight? How do you handle somebody throwing rocks or mud on you? How do you handle people who talk back to their parents? How do you talk back to your parents? How'd that go? Not good in a circle. Okay, how do you work? How do you forgive people? How do you let things slide? How do you speak up when you're mad? How do you act when you think nobody's watching? Somebody's always watching. That's your circle. And everybody's got one. So use your circle for something that's going to outlive you. Now, I'm not going to get philosophical about your purpose. That's coming. That's another talk. It's coming. Oh, I've got it ready. But show people what loyalty looks like. Yeah. Take up for people when they're not around. Show people what loyalty looks like. Let people see you finish something you started. You don't have all these projects half done. Let them finish cut your grass, wash your car, work on your car. All these things. We knew who did that in the circle. We knew who didn't do it. And those who didn't do it, okay, are they older? Oh, maybe we should do that for them. You knew who did that because you paid attention. Be the reason somebody believes the good people are still out here. Yeah. Hey, good guys always finish last? That's crap. Show people failure. Show people how to handle failure. You'll see that if you're paying attention. You're not putting on a show either. The circle was not about a show. All right? Ladies went out and got the paper in their house coat. That wasn't for show, for sure. If her house coat was too short, maybe they would talk about her. I'm kidding. They didn't do that. Yeah, they did. However, it's not about putting on a show because you can't fake it for long. And we were always around each other. Something was always happening. We knew the mailman's birthday, and we would put something out for him. When the garbage men came around, a lot of the ladies would bring out a treat or a glass of water or something. We knew what was going on. And it's about being kind. And not the kind they talk about today. You're worrying about hurting somebody's mental journey. No, you figured things out. So the secret is, it's no secret, you're already qualified. You don't need a degree. You don't need more money. You don't need more free time. You don't need that thing you're waiting on. Just need to stop underestimating the power of your presence. You have a circle, but you are in it and people need you. You have a role, whether you've defined it or not. Your porch is what somebody needs. They need to come sit for a minute. And that porch could be at work. It could be, goodness, it could be at your kid's ball game or somewhere. You could be sitting under a tree or leaning against a tree and somebody comes up just to have a conversation. That turns into a porch. Somebody just needs that for a minute, man. So be the story that they'll tell one day when they're trying to figure something else out. Everybody's doing the best they can. I believe that. But everybody has a circle. The real question is, what are you doing with yours? We don't necessarily choose our circle. You may not have picked everybody in your circle. I know I didn't. No. Sometimes they're just there. And I'm talking, neighbors, coworkers, in-laws. Hey, I did pretty well there. Old friends. You outgrew them. I haven't talked to some of the people in years and years and years. But I didn't choose for them to go away. Your circle evolves. But you do choose the influence to some degree. A lot of times you have a lot more influence than you think about. So you don't need to change the circle. You just need to show up. You need to show up. You're already living the example. You might as well make it a good one. Even your struggles are an example for somebody. Yeah, wow. It's a tough lesson. You don't have to be perfect. Just be real. Show you're making progress. In your circle, they'll see you and they'll see consistent. They'll see improvement. People are encouraged when they see somebody fighting the same battles too and not giving up. You giving up gives them reason to give up. So your mess becomes a map when you're honest about it. Also, influence doesn't always announce itself. And I see this over and over and over. And I tell people who've influenced me, they had no idea. And people that tell me that, it's, oh, wow, man, if I'd have known, I would have straightened up a little bit. No, it's got to be real. But you might not get applause or likes or thumbs ups or thank you notes. Most influence works more like it's like a crock pot instead of a microwave. Influence is slow and quiet, and you don't necessarily see it. But after a while, you smell something. Oh, what is that? It took 4 or 5 hours for me to even smell something cooking. And by the end of the day, that's the way influence is. It's not quick, satisfy me now, boom, boom, boom. No, just because you don't see, the ripple doesn't mean you're not making a splash. Okay? So, the thing is, too, you're shaping the future without realizing it. You have no clue. You have no clue. When you speak life into somebody, or model consistency, or show kindness, maybe it's not even deserved, you're giving people a reference point. Yeah. Instead of, I think one reason Miss Tally treated me with some grace is I didn't talk back to her. I didn't call the cops on her. I didn't yell at her. Others did. I said please and thank you and yes ma'am and no ma'am. That people saw me do that, and that draws a line somewhere. Now other ways, I did shoot her with a BB gun. So, but when people are raising their own kids, facing their setbacks or deciding what kind of person do they want to be, some of these things come back. I knew who the crazy kids were. I knew who the timid, quiet kids were. I knew who was in the middle. And now I see what they've become. That's nothing like they were, but they had a path. In some way, we were all part of that. So the way you live becomes someone else's maybe definition of what's possible. And that's important. And I think the main thing is, and you may be thinking, well, Dave, I didn't have that circle. I didn't have that wonderful deal. I mean, hey, other people didn't like my circle. I loved it. It was wonderful. Here's the thing, though. You can always redraw your circle. Maybe your circle's got toxic. maybe, I don't know, drama or betrayal or something is happening. I don't know. Maybe you've outgrown it. That doesn't mean you failed. That's just part of growth and evolution. You can step out, set new boundaries. You can start again. Learn from past circles, though. You should. You should. If you need to redraw your circle, do it. But take the lessons learned in shaping your new circle. You can love people without letting them sit on your porch. You know what? Sometimes that's necessary. We've talked about deselecting. So, I'm not, you can tell I'm being metaphorical, but I am being serious about the circles. Everything I need to know, I believe this. I heard on a porch. I figured it out on a playground. Or learned from someone who didn't know they were teaching me. Sometimes they taught me what not to do. However, they were teaching. So slow down. Pay attention. And never underestimate the value of where you come from and where you are. Because that's going to determine how happy you are when you go. It's crazy how 40 years after I left a circle in Sheffield, Alabama, I lived in another circle. Solana Beach, California. California. You know how far California is from Sheffield, Alabama? Only this time, I'm not the young kid, the young student. I'm the older guy on the corner. We moved a couple of years ago, but that's where the garage was. We tried to make it a lively place, a happy place. I remember every time, Sam or Nicholas or, the kids from across the street, all of them, they would come around. There's 17 kids in that circle when we moved there. They would come through and talk to me, and I was open with them. And, hey, how you doing? Call them by name. I would call them by the wrong name sometimes just to mess with them. I was Mr. Swan. I was Mr. Purtle. But I tried to be consistent and welcoming and not let them be afraid. It was pretty cool. So, notice your porch. Take time to pay attention. Take care of the people that you want there. And then, hey, it's going to prepare you. Recall and application. Thanks so much for listening, putting up with me today with some nostalgia. Hopefully you can pull a lesson from that. Everybody's got a circle. Make sure your circle is what you need it to be and learn from it. Hit me up at david@otalks.com or david@otalks.com. And then hit my website. I'm averaging about 25 to 30 new people hitting the website. And you're great feedback. You can give me feedback at my email or on the website. And I love it. And I respond to all of it. So thanks so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the support you're giving me. But most of all, I appreciate you talking with Dave. Giddy up.